Now we are going to extrude out the lower part of the leg. I'm just going to go to my move brush first and just move this down a little bit. I think it needs to be longer. It needs to have a longer torso. Okay, something like that. Smooth that out. And maybe thicken this area out a little bit where the leg's going to be extruded out. Okay, so hold Control on your keyboard, and we're going to be using the mask pen and paint out the mask where we're going to be extruding out the legs right there. Now invert that, Control I on your keyboard. Go to the Move tool. Click on Go to Unmask Mesh Center. And we're going to have to reset the orientation of the Gizmo 3D here. To reset the orientation of the Gizmo 3D, first click on the lock key to unlock the Gizmo 3D. And then click on Reset Orientation, which is going to be this icon right there. So go ahead and click on that. And just make sure that you lock the Gizmo 3D again before you start extruding out. Control-Shift-Click on your keyboard, hover your mouse over the green arrow, and just move it down. All the way down. Okay, something like that. And as you can see that the surface, the bottom surface, is slanted. So to fix that, all you gotta do is hover your mouse over the green rectangular shape here, the scale Y, and then go ahead, click and drag it down. So that flattens the bottom surface. Go back to draw mode and just go ahead and redynamesh that. Click, hold, drag in the background. And you could just smooth it out. Now we could add a little bit more clay on the inner thigh area. So how do you add more clay on there? You could use the clay brush for this. Go here, go to the letter C section, and you're going to find the clay brush right there. That clay brush will allow you to add a clay on top of the mesh right there. Along with the clay brush, I also like to use the clay tubes. If you go here, the C section, there's that clay tube right there. If you click on that and you sculpt on it, you could have more of the defined brush stroke. The main difference between the two clay brushes is when you smooth out the clay tubes, if you make your sculpt here and you smooth it out, the details stay there more than the clay brush does, okay? The clay brush allows you to make a smoother transition between different forms and respects the existing topology of the character. Starting out, I prefer to use the clay brush to build up the basic shape, but when I start to add the muscle fibers, I use the clay tubes a lot to create the details and the muscle striations. So just adding the clay there to add more shape there, some thickness. And while we're here, we could add a little bit more on the butt area. So not thinking about the details at all, just adding some basic shape there, basic clay that we could work with later on. And adding a little bit more clay here also. Constantly navigate around your view as you sculpt. And we could go ahead and extrude down the lower leg area. Hold Control. This time I'm going to use the mask rectangular tool here. If you click, hold, and drag, you see that rectangular shape there. You could hold the space bar as you drag, and you could bring that to any part of the canvas. And we want to mask out just the bottom edge here of the leg. So that's what we're going to use to extrude out the leg area, the lower leg. Control I on your keyboard to invert. Go to the Move tool. Control Shift click as you drag the green arrow down. All the way down. Okay. Let's move it this way, closer to each other. And what we're going to do is we're going to be extruding out the foot in a minute. Okay, just unmask that and just redynamesh. Control click and drag onto the background. And just smooth it out. And as you can see here, the legs are just way too straight. So we don't want it like that. We don't want the legs to be too straight. If you want to make your leg look natural, you gotta have that curve on there that you're gonna add. Okay, that curvature area. Okay, so this is the type of leg that we were going for. Okay. So let's go ahead and fix this here. Okay. Just using the Move brush, go to the Move brush, crank it all the way up, and if you can't crank further, you could just turn off the dynamic option again. And going back to the draw size, press S on your keyboard to adjust the draw size. You want to use a shortcut for that. And just move it. Constantly adjusting the brush size, making it smaller, making it bigger. Never settling with just one draw size, always changing up the brush size there. If you want to move a large part of your mesh, then you gotta crank up the brush size. Okay, so from the side view, we got that curve shape going. Okay. And then we're gonna have to extrude out the foot there also. And in the front view, we don't want the front view to make it look too straight either. Okay, so right now it's just way too straight. We gotta give that curve to it also. Okay, we gotta have that nice curve going. So let's go ahead and fix that using the Move brush, just adjusting the shape, constantly adjusting the brush size as I go. Take your time on this, guys. Take your time on adjusting the base mesh, especially if this is your first time using ZBrush. Okay, you're gonna make a lot of mistakes if this is your first time using ZBrush, but you could always undo stuff. You could always fix your mistakes. Just take your time on it. No need to rush. Get to know the software. And also, if you want to save your work, you could go to the tool section here, go to File, Save As, and you could save it wherever you want. I'm just going to save this right now. And just give him that pubic area here. And I'm just going to use the clay brush to just create an indication that the knee is somewhere here, this area. And remember, you could add the clay by sculpting right on top, and then if you want to push in the clay, you could always hold the Alt key to push it in, to dig deep into the clay. Need to move brush again. Just trying to get the shape down. And I could use the standard brush. I'm gonna make sure that I turn on the dynamic button again for the move brush, and then go back to my standard brush. Just adding a little thickness here in this area, and also here using the standard brush. I like to use the standard brush and the clay brush at the beginning stages of sculpting. They are really effective in building up forms. And I see that there's a little bit weird protrusion going on here. It looks like it's a little bit edgy on that area. So I'm just gonna use the flatten brush. Use the flatten brush to fix stuff like that. As I sculpt, you guys also check out the type of brush that I'm using constantly as you see me sculpt. And I'm going to extrude out the foot area now, okay? So I'm going to mask out part of the mesh here and then just extrude out the foot. Hold Control on the keyboard, going to the mask pen. Go ahead and paint out the area where you're going to have the foot extruded out. Somewhere there. Control I on the keyboard to invert that. Go to the Move tool. Control Shift click as you drag the blue arrow forward. And you could use the red arrow to just kind of open that up a bit, so it's not going to be too straight. Okay, and then we could redynamesh that. And then just using the clay brush to just add a little bit of thickness here at the top. And then redynameshed. Now let's say I want to isolate the foot, right? I could hold Control Shift click on the keyboard as I drag the mouse onto the background, then onto the mesh, and you're going to see this green rectangular selection tool there. You can isolate a part of the mesh if you want to focus on just one part of the character. So let's say I just want to focus on the foot there without seeing other parts of the mesh. I could do that by doing this. And I could even look at the top view. You could press F on your keyboard to zoom in. So let's say your object is far away like that. You could press F to zoom in right away. And then just using the move brush, you just move it. So I'm just thinking of the basic shape of the foot. Have that curve there going. And just gonna move this down a little bit. Smooth it out. So for the foot, just gonna add more. For the foot, you're gonna see that there's a little bit of thickness going on here. And then around this area, it just gets flatter there, okay? And if you want to bring back the rest of the mesh, hold Control Shift on your keyboard as you click onto the background. So that brings back your mesh that you were working with before. Yeah, just adding a little bit more clay there. And I want to make an indication that there are toes here. So I'm just going to use the damn standard brush to do this. Just adding some indication that we got some toes going there. And then we dynamesh it. There you go. Alright, so maybe here it's looking a little bit dipped in. So see that little dip? You could always use the clay brush to add a clay on top to kind of fix that area. Smooth it out. Okay, so got the basic shape down, the base meshed. And in the next lecture, we are going to start implementing the primary forms of the muscle area of the character.